Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Newington Town Council special meeting of June 30th to order at 5:30 p.m. If you would all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America and to the
republic
God,
for which it stands,
liberty and justice.
one nation,
one
under
nation,
God,
under God,
indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
and justice for all.
That's difficult with all of us at different paces on a Zoom. Okay. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda is roll call. Susan, if you're there, if you would do that for me, please.
Yes. Hello?
Hi, Susan, you broke up there for a minute. Can you start again?
Yeah, Counselor Anist?
Here.
Counselor Braverman?
Here.
Counselor Pudraco?
Here.
Counselor Camillo?
Here.
Counselor Donahue?
Here.
Counselor Mankey?
Here.
Counselor Minor?
Here.
Counselor Nagel?
Here.
Mayor Del Buono?
Here. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is public participation. Any member of the public can participate because it's a Zoom call. If you're in the application and you would like to join us, you can use the raise hand function in the participants window at the bottom. If you are calling into the meeting, you may use the *9 function to raise your hand so that I know to recognize you. I'm just going to click on over to our attendees. Right now we have 3 attendees. I'll just give them a moment. Okay, no one right now is raising their hand, so we can move on to the next item on the agenda. Remarks by counselors on public participation, which we had none, so we will move on. Consideration of old business. The first item to be discussed is discussion of end of year department surpluses. And for this, I will turn it over to our town manager, Mr. Chapman. We are planning on reviewing surpluses for both the town and the Board of Education. Mr. Chapman?
Yes, hi. Okay. What we've done is prepared for you several handouts. James, what's the next slide you have?
Any of the slides will actually be actual documents. So which one would you like to see first, the town or the board?
Show the town end of the year, please. Okay, so what you're looking at now is what we anticipate will be available at the end of the year by department within the general government. These are surpluses that have been a result of several reasons. In some cases, because of the COVID-19, and in other cases, because of the mild winter. Overall, if you can scroll it down a little bit, James, you'll see the bottom line is in the $1.1 million range, 1.2. Again, these are estimates based upon the most recent data. There still is a couple more POs that are out there, and they will be, appropriately charged. But all of the salaries and so forth, all the contractual services have been accounted for. So we'll be turning back about 1.1 or $1.2 million at the end of this year. Are there any questions on that?
Any questions, anyone? No? Let me see. Sorry, I was clicked over. Yeah, Counselor Mankey?
And that money goes to the general fund, right?
That's correct. That'll all be returned to the general fund.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. if you notice, like the highway has $180,000 coming back, and that's a result of the very mild winter. So there wasn't that much overtime that had to be used during the snow operations. So that would be coming back. Solid waste, we've had a pretty good year with that, returning 40,000. So overall, library operations, because again, the COVID-19, they've been closed, so about $100,000 for them. Employee benefits, if you see the $100,000 down there, that's the result of employees coming and going during the year, and good in performance with our we'll say medical and so forth. So the combination of a number of things. If you have no other questions,
there's a few other hands up. I'm sorry. Counselor Donahue?
Hey, Keith, what, because I can't do the math that quick, what is that percentage of the budget?
well, we have, what do we have? 50,000 or that in that range. So $1 million, it's 1/50th of it. So that would be, you're asking me.
I'll get my phone.
I had planned on calculating that and I did not.
Yeah, me too.
It's good though.
I'll take it.
I'll grab my budget book. You guys keep talking. The next question is from Counselor Menke, I believe.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, can you just tell me, do you know how much we turned back to the general fund last year at the end of the year?
I wasn't here last year, but
Yeah, I know.
Janet's on with us. She may be able to answer that. Janet, are you there?
I am here. It was a lot less than this. I think for the expenditure side, we maybe returned about 600,000.
Okay.
So about half of what we're turning back this year.
Yep.
And Janet, what's the percentage? You're the finance mathematician here.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. If you're saying we have a $15 million budget, it's about 2.3.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, great. Counselor Menke, you're all set?
No, I'm done. I'm sorry. You can lower my hand.
I got it. Deputy Mayor Bedrejko?
Okay. For the elections, I mean, that's because the primaries were delayed, but I mean, that's going to be spent shortly in August or whatever, I'm assuming.
Well, this money is being returned because we didn't spend it, but your new budget has a similar expenditure already in the budget.
Okay. And just cautionary, because I'm, solid waste and MDC, although there's something to return this year, I know both of those are going to be substantially increased. I mean, MDC because of the whole mirror thing, and now that Connecticut's going to have to start trucking trash out of state, our expenses are going to go up more than we anticipated. And we know MDC is going to be going up. So just a cautionary, well, I mean, we know that, so it's not going to probably be this way next year. But I'm also curious about the 130,000 from the police. Do we know why?
We've had a couple of breaks in service. Some positions are vacant right now. And I think there was a reduction in the amount of overtime for the year. So between those two variables, the costs have been reduced by 130,000.
I'll just add to this, is Janet, that it was staffing primarily patrol, investigative and support services. And the overtime, as Keith mentioned, was down. Some of the overtime is for training and such, which they haven't been doing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Counselor Nagel?
Trying to unmute myself. I know, Keith, you mentioned that some of these things are directly related to COVID. Some maybe indirectly. I was wondering what percentage or how high compared to other reasons that we've managed to gain more money back into the general fund due to the unfortunate circumstances of COVID.
I'm sorry. Dave, did you ask a question? I didn't get
Yes,
that.
I did. I'll shorten it. How many, what percentage or how high compared to the total budget returns were the returns directly or indirectly due to COVID? I know you mentioned some.
Okay, Janet, do you have any handle on it?
They're kind of mixed in, so I wouldn't say that we did reduce filling positions. Can you tie that to COVID? Then yeah, the majority of this is tied to COVID. If you look at some things like Keith was talking about, like the library, that was primarily due to COVID. If you're looking at something like the grounds, that was seasonal workers, a lot of that, so that was tied to COVID. But you know, highway and stuff like that, as Keith mentioned, that was due to a mild winter, good fuel prices. They all have, you know, the reasons, elections, COVID, primary got moved. So it's kind of a mixture of both.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say it's about, you know, 60-40, 60 due to COVID and 40 due to just some really good circumstances we had this budget year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other council comment or question? Okay, I would just like to applaud the town departments, quite honestly, because any efforts to, you know, we have all recognized, I'm sorry, Councilor Annis just has her hand up. I'll pause. Go ahead, Councilor Annis.
Oh, no, I was going to ask, is this going to be available to us to receive by email?
We can do that, sure, that's not a problem. Yeah.
Yeah, only because it's very difficult to look at it because he doesn't have it on the whole screen. And if you want to look at a particular line item, you can't. So I would appreciate it if we could do that.
Okay. Can you do that, James?
And take care of it. Also is in your town council laptop folder as well.
Well, I can't get into mine, so that's probably why.
No problem.
It's fun, as you were speaking, Councilor Annis, I was looking back at my email because I'm like, I know I printed it from somewhere. It was in the K folder. Okay, let me see, anybody else? Okay. No, I was just gonna comment and say that, you know, even throughout our budget deliberations, we have acknowledged that not only is, you know, times are tight in general, but with the COVID crisis and not kind of knowing where it's going to go or where it's going to end up, we've all been very conscious of spending and concerned with what next year may hold. So I'm really pleased to see that our departments, while some of it was COVID driven, some of it I'm sure was, you know, departments choosing not to spend and making sure that what was left was able to be returned to the general fund. So I am grateful to all of our staff members as well as Mr. Chapman at the helm for making sure that we had some surplus left this year to rely on, quite frankly, for next year when we need it more. So that being said, Mr. Chapman, you can continue on.
Okay, James, could you pull up the Board of Education report? Okay, this was submitted to us just the other day, but as you can see, there's a balance as of May 26th of about $5.5 million. But then there's a list of areas that $5.5 million is planned to be expended or has been expended already. I don't know if who is anybody from the school department on tonight?
I'm looking in the attendees and I see Paul, which I'm assuming is the board chair, Paul Vasella. I had
Dr.
invited.
Gromit's here too.
Oh, she is. I don't see. Oh, she's on our side. That's why I'm
Yes.
looking in the attendees. There we go.
Okay, so who's
Welcome,
there?
Dr. Brumett.
Hello. Good evening.
So Maureen, could
Yeah.
you just go over the report that you provided?
Yes, this was discussed, I believe, at one of our last board meetings. We had a balance, and I can't see the whole page because I see the attendees, but the expenditures are the balance at 5.5 million on May 26th. There are some end of year expenses that we had. One of the things that we did to reduce our budget was to do some buy aheads in order to be able to take the lower budget this year. All of these are part of projects that we were working on. Can you scroll further down, James? So Money returned to the town. Actually, this is a little bit lower than what it should be, but money returned to the town was estimated to be 909. Money to non-lapsing fund per the MOU, and money that would have been returned through ECS or excess cost. A non-lapsing fund payment, LED lighting improvements, but the numbers here don't 100% match with what we're returning to the town. I don't know if you have the numbers I sent over last night. The money returned to the town is actually 1.5 million. The non-lapsing fund money is accurate, and the excess cost was reanalyzed, and it is $200,000 back to the town. So this is accurate, the memo that just got put up. So turning back to the town, I believe this should be coming your way tomorrow, is $2.2 million. And again, that's 1.5 million that was money not spent back to the town. The 590,000 was our MOU that was agreed upon as a one-time allocation to a non-lapsing fund, and the $200,000 in excess cost overpayment for the good of the order. That was, we billed excess cost and then the shutdown happened, so we ended up getting too much money from the state, and they did not want it back. They said, don't worry, we'll just take it out of the town's ECS money. So we said that isn't right, it'll make a shortfall for the town. So we've been tracking that and estimating what you might get in a shortfall from ECS, and that's what it looks like, about $200,000. So that'll make you whole on ECS. What is not referenced here is we also put another 1% in non-lapsing because at the time when our budgets were developed, we did not know COVID was around the corner, and we still are in the throes of prepping for the fall. The guidelines just came out yesterday, and they're pretty heavy on PPE, cleanliness, and bringing all the students back. So we are going to be investing additional monies come the fall in PPEs and cleaning protocols that allow us to adhere to CDC guidelines while allowing all kids to come back if parents so choose. So that's the end of that's our summary. The previous memo was a little old. That was backdated to May.
Mr. Chapman, did you have anything further about that?
Oh, if did you want to see the rest of the expenditures on the school site? Can you put that back on, James? Maureen, can you go through these remaining line items?
It's hard for me to read it because the numbers are getting truncated on the right-hand side. So I'm not sure how I can generally talk about them. I did talk about COVID supplies, NHS security. It's a man trap for the high school right now. The only thing stopping a bad guy from coming into the high school is a hall monitor. So we're upgrading on that. Our district security, that's just normal security enhancements. Linked into that is Sonatrol. They all of our systems are in need of updating. They're starting to fail. Teaching supplies, that was for some of these were, again, these are expenditures from last year. So teaching supplies to get through the rest of the year, we were having to replenish some Chromebook supplies or other things for the online platform. As I mentioned earlier, the buy-aheads were purposeful because we tried to keep our budget ask low. So we bought some teaching supplies ahead. Tech and HVAC modifications, that was trying to get our AC systems, they're called pneumatics, modernized, because right now when they break, there is no one that can fix them. So that pretty much summarized that. It said Sonatrol already, but yeah, the part that is outdated is the second half of this page with all of the other items about the amount. At the bottom, I'm not sure, these are kind of all over the place, but we had to do floor tile abatement at NHS and John Patterson for safety purposes. LED lighting was part of our overall project to do lighting improvements through capital, as well as an opportunity came about to get a real good benefit on getting lowered costs for lighting upgrades and to lower our electricity costs over time. That was something that I believe we had to get a bid waiver from the town last week. Because of the nature of our graduation, we needed a updated PA system. The bus replacement plan, we did not have any money in the capital for buses next year. And Keith and I have spoken about the money that is set aside for the bus, future bus garage location. So we did use some board funds for bus purchasing. Other, I can't really delineate that, but that would have been year-end closeout things, bills. So we had to pay for some of the expenses relative to Colliers for the Anna Reynolds project. I don't have all the breakdown of that.
Dr. Brummel, would you say that the other is essentially POs that were already kind of hanging out there, or are these new expenses that were anticipated by the end of the year? Because I wasn't sure about that.
You know, that's a good question, and I don't want to speak out of turn. There are so many closeouts on purchase orders as the year rolls along. Legal fees, because of we've been doing some negotiations and lots of consultation about COVID. So I imagine there's some legal fees in there. Like, as I mentioned, we had Collier's expenses. I really couldn't articulate the remaining monies. Could be closing out bills, subscriptions to certain products that come due. Like I just saw a subscription come through yesterday for Newzella. It's a platform that we use frequently with our online platform. So I couldn't get into the granular details, but I would surmise that it would be some of those items. The purchasing would have been what you already saw. The PA, the LED lighting, the floor abatement, the security upgrades, lighting, the lighting programs, technology, as I didn't get into a lot of detail here. We didn't get any allocation from the CIP this year. It was sort of determined that it shouldn't be in CIP any longer, but we have real Chromebook needs for the fall. So we did use some of the realized savings to purchase Chromebooks for the fall. Specifically K2, we had a bit of a disparity with those children because they only had classroom sets. So when we went to a shutdown, K2 kids had to share Chromebooks with their siblings, and that didn't go so well. We could provide some, but certainly not all. So now we do need to make sure that grade level is covered should we need to shut down again. And again, we began some COVID prep for the fall. We were waiting to get more state guidance, but some of the initial purchasing was plexiglass to put barricades in front of all of our offices for safety of secretaries, cleaning products, gloves, masks. I've ordered a mask for every student, every teacher with their school logo on it. So that sort of covers some of those items. And I think I pretty much spoke to all the other items.
Okay. I see a few counselors' hands up, so I'll go to Deputy Mayor Bedrejko.
Okay, yeah, I'm glad to see that there's some pre-preparation for the fall in terms of the COVID. I just want to make sure that I understand this. So as of May 26th, there was a little over $5 million in realized savings. So most of these items then were not bonuses, but things that were, wow, you know, we've got the money, now we can do it. They weren't really planned, correct?
The technology was planned, but we just didn't have any money for it because of the CIP planning, the CIP funding the way it went. COVID, you're right. COVID, at the time that our budget was developed for next year, we had no knowledge of COVID. I would call the security at the high school, yes. The other security, the window screenings, that was planned. IEDs were planned because we had lowered our budget ask because of that. And I would say too, it's important to clarify that we did have a balance on May 26th of 5.5 million, but we still had another month and a few weeks to the school year. And since that May 26th, we've been convening curriculum writing committees, the reopened and Newington Task Force, which has got a cost attached to it. We've got over 100 folks participating. So some of that 26 wasn't like at the end of the year, we would have had 5.5 million. That doesn't account for several payrolls, because a lot of teachers get that balloon check at the end of the year. So our last payroll is pretty substantial. I would say the sonatrol we had to do because a lot of our systems were failing. Lower down on the screen, I would say the lighting was an add-on, but that was because we got a real good deal from a local vendor, and basically it's going to be a very minimal output. A lot of that's going to be rebated. I would say the PA system was an add-on because of the graduation. The bus replacement, yep, that was an add-on when we didn't get the allocation. Second year in a row, we had several buses that are beyond what is considered the replacement cycle age. That's since been dialed back a bit, but yeah, the rest were planned, except for what I just delineated.
Do you have any idea on ballpark what you think that the instructions from the governor for next year, how it's going to impact your budget?
Well, if we can keep kids coming in and they don't get us into a hybrid model, I think once we have that initial outlay of PPEs and cleaning supplies, which we've planned for with those non-lapsing dollars, we should be okay. What'll get a little tricky is if we have to just bring some kids in and have some kids at home. But even that, I think we've got enough legwork done on that to not have to worry about it. They did initially prior to the most recent guidance say, oh, you have to have all these bus runs because you're only going to have 10 kids on a bus. Now they're saying everyone goes on a bus. There's no limit. They wear the PPEs. We're going to probably provide bus monitors just to ensure that kids are adhering to the masks. And then of course, cleaning protocols, but we've planned for that because we were doing some of that before shutdown. So we sort of knew what was going to head that way. The biggest expenses will be PPEs and cleaning protocols. I'm not anticipating hiring additional staff except maybe bus monitors, but I'm hoping I can just add hours to existing paras. We're not adding additional teachers. We have CARES money, which came in a few weeks ago. We got about $225,000, which we can use toward a little bit of staffing if we want to work with kids who fell behind while they were on shutdown. But I am cautiously optimistic that we've planned well enough ahead with the non-lapsing monies that we can cover the COVID related expenses.
Thank you. That's good to hear. Thank you.
Counselor Donahue?
So just a question, being, first time through the budget cycle, if you didn't have this realized savings, where would this money have come from to do this stuff?
It wouldn't have happened.
Okay.
But the buses would not have been purchased. We wouldn't have been able to cut our budget. And I certainly wouldn't have been able to send any money back to the town. So we did try to cover budget shortfalls with the savings and also earmark money for the town because of the current status.
All right. And just a separate question on the buses. Where can I view the bus guidelines for when buses need to be replaced?
We do have an articulated bus replacement cycle, and I can certainly send that to, it was provided during town CIP deliberations, but I'm more than happy to resubmit that tomorrow. It's something that Dean Barnes maintains and updates annually, and the buses that we earmarked had 12 years, they were 12 years old or older.
Is this it, Maureen? Can you see me? I'm not sure if you can see me.
I can see that is absolutely part of it. There may be more
Okay.
to it, but that is part of it, yes.
Yeah, I just got the grid. That's the only piece I have, but
I should
Yeah.
be able to, I don't want to go into my email now and disconnect.
Yeah,
but I should be able to provide that to the town.
That would be awesome.
Happy to, yep.
I know, just to speak to the buses, when this, because I was at the CIP meetings, when we discussed buses, there were a couple of things that came up and led to the buses being removed from CIP this year. And one of them was that there was a $600,000+ balance, which I know you spoke to, in the reserve fund. But the other thing that was brought up was that on the spreadsheet that I just kind of showed on the screen a little bit, the age of the buses listed for replacement, the age of them was listed as 9 years. And from what I recall, and I could be wrong, it was recommended for replacement at 11 years. So the committee thought that another year could, we could maintain for another year before replacing those, was the thought process of the committee from my recollection. If anybody else that was there wants to chime in, you can. But I know that was kind of the deliberation. And then in terms of the Chromebooks, Dr. Brumman, I can't agree more. That certainly needs to be a priority in terms of replacing and making sure that every student has a device moving forward in case we do need to go either to a hybrid or another shutdown kind of model. And those were removed because they weren't deemed, so to speak, to be, meet the qualifications for CIP. So they should be planned for in the operational budget if that's the recommendation of the committee, which it was this year. But I think the amount that was planned originally was 188,000 and the expenditure was 675. So I'm assuming, is that just because you had extra grade levels to cover?
No, the request would have covered, I believe, 2 grade levels. That was the normal replacement cycle. But then with the COVID, we had to then institute a K-2 1-to-1. And
Okay.
that's where that came from. The other expense would be that we found also in COVID that some of our tutors and paras needed to have access to a Chromebook so they could properly assist students. And a lot of them didn't have their own devices. So it's both K-2, our normal replacement cycle, and then additional for staff who need to assist children on shutdown. And that's where it added up to 675. There might have also been, there is one other thing, and it was a system upgrade, a connectivity upgrade, and I'm not going to be able to speak the right language, but it was because of the potential for having to go back full out online next year, we wanted to increase the broadband, and I'm not a techie, but that was part of it as well.
Okay, thank you. I see a couple more hands up. Counselor Minor.
Thank you. Dr. Brumman, thanks for joining tonight. I just had one question. I know the state initially was talking about substantially smaller class sizes. Have they changed that now? Is that what they're?
Yes,
Okay.
substantially. They threw us an unexpected curveball of everyone back. It used to be 10 to a classroom, not anymore.
Okay. No, for lack of a better term, happy on that because I was very concerning when I heard that of talking a substantially smaller class size of A, physically
Right.
where to put them, and B, the staffing to accommodate
Exactly.
them. So that was it. Thank you very much.
Counselor Minor, can you knock on wood, please? Because
I'm knocking as hard as I can.
Agreed.
Counselor Nagel.
I just wanted to back up what you had said, Mayor Delbuno, that indeed, it wasn't that the CIP committee didn't think Chromebooks were valuable. It's just that it just was not the place given what our charge was, if you looked at the charter and so on. And that I do believe that the CIP committee got the chart and so on concerning buses, and the difference between the amounts is what you had said, but I don't know whether the whole council got that chart and so on. That's it.
I will provide that absolutely, and it will show you the ages of the buses in question.
Looking for any other council question or comment. Dr. Brumman, I think one of the things that struck me about the list provided in terms of some of the expenditures was that several of those, in my estimation, could have been qualifying expenses for CIP monies. And so I did look back just to see if they had come through at all at any point, because I couldn't remember if the previous town manager had cut before it came to deliberations in terms of requests from the Board of Ed. So, for example, the man trap at the high school, very needed, no doubt there, but I didn't see a request for that through CIP. And I was wondering if there was any history behind some of those requests. There were a few that to me looked like they could have been CIP, and I may be wrong on some of them, I'm guessing, but the man trap was one. The district-wide security, because it's window screening, could possibly have qualified for CIP. The HVAC modifications, the floor tile abatement, the bus replacement we talked about already, but it just seemed like there were several that really should have gone through CIP. I'm wondering if those were in the pipeline or if they had ever been requested.
They have been talked about. I cannot tell you definitively if they were ever in a CIP request. There's a security line in there. I don't know if that was ever in a line. Frankly, after coming to the district and noting that concern, it was always in my goal area to have that as an improvement, but I don't believe it was in a current request. I would say that HVAC was, the tech was, Sonitrol, again, security, there's a line for security, and normally we would have planned for that, but it was an unexpected, your system is starting to wear down, and we had numerous camera failures at the high school this year. So that was, we were told, upgrade your system or you're gonna be ineffective. So I would say probably the man trap was not specifically previously mentioned. That really might be the only one. The PA system for the music, but I already mentioned that. And I can't see at the top of the list, but I don't think, COVID prep, we wouldn't have been able to plan for that. No, I would say the man trap is the one that sticks out.
Okay. Counselor Deputy Mayor Bedrejko, sorry.
Dr. Brumman, I'm just curious. You said that the governor has changed direction and said all students will be returning, which is wonderful. But I don't know if it's related to the budget per se, but I am curious if more parents say, I'm not sending my kids back, does that then become the onus on them to do homeschooling, or is there any responsibility to the school district?
It's on us. The governor was clear that, and the commissioner, that parents have the right to say, you know what, I'm not, your protocols are great, but I'm not sending my child back until there's a vaccine. I do have a parent group that I'm meeting with tomorrow. They volunteered to be on the task force. I have about 40 of them. So they'll hear from me firsthand what the protocols will entail. But yes, at the end of the day, they could very well say, sorry, I'm not coming back. And we also will have a cadre of teachers that may fall into that category as well due to their own health issues. My vision for that is that we get fortunate enough to have enough teachers that need to not come back because of their own reasons and health issues that can then be assigned to the children that are being kept home by parent request. But yes, ultimately those children are our responsibility unless a parent goes full out and says, I'm going to homeschool my child, which is a whole different statement where they're going to be responsible for the education. So that would be a whole other different thing. But that in terms of saying, I want the online model Newington schools because I don't want to send my child back.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chapman, did you have anything further on the subject?
No, other than being new back here again after many years, I'm concerned that we can't have this become the practice. We have to, my concern right now is if we don't have the monies that are surplus being turned back to the town, it seems to me that the budgeting process is failing because it's either we're over budgeting and that's not fair, or we're not budgeting professionally, which is what we're all supposed to be doing. And, I make it a point to make sure that we don't spend any money that's not approved and allocated properly. And I just have concerns that, that $5 million or $2 million or whatever it ends up to be at the end of the year, beyond what was already promised, should have come back to the town, would help offset some of the expenses that we're going to have facing us next year. And if not, if COVID goes away and everything's good, okay, then it certainly could, but apply to some of the bonding that we have out there and reduce down the cost of that. So, I understand what the superintendent's saying, but I just have concerns that there has to be some checks and balances here. I could do the same thing on our side of the budget. And I don't think you guys would appreciate that. So I think it has to be a fair and equitable situation for both parties.
I could just interject. I believe this is the first time that the board's ever turned money back to the town that I've been made aware of. But equally to the point, all of those expenses that you're reading about now were authorized by the board finance subcommittee and voted on by the full board. So they were not done with any lack of clarity on the board side. I will also say we were in the same boat as the town. We had a lot of realized savings this year due to, COVID shutdown, buses weren't running, subs weren't being used, for many of the same reasons that the town had that. And I would say, with the exception of the man trap and the money that we turned back to the town, because that 5 million continues to be a little bit of a deceptive positioning there, because that was a month and a half ago. We are sending a substantial amount back to the town. And we've already started to look for to get some of the COVID prep done over the summer so that it's not hitting us in the fall. But, I've heard what folks are saying and we'll continue to discuss those issues collaboratively. And I still hope that the town is at least feeling that the money that was sent back was a first time thing and that it was a good thing.
Thank you. Counselor Camilla, your hand was up and it went down. Is that purposeful? Are you good? Okay. Counselor Minor, you're next.
Thank you. Just for Dr. Brumman as well as to Keith, I think this is first level on both the town side and the BOE side of significant returns to the general fund that are probably in excess of 3% or thereabouts of our overall budget. And I think is important to note that I think it's a first time probably to the substantial levels on the town side, again, due to specific issues that allowed for it, as well as the BOE with their issues that allowed for it. But I think this is the first time that I can remember in recent history that there's been a collaborative effort between the town manager and the Board of Ed superintendent to work collaboratively on behalf of the taxpayers at large. And I appreciate the efforts of everybody that's involved at this point. And hopefully we can continue to be fiscally responsible moving forward to allow for the opportunities that present themselves when they do. So thank you again for both.
Thank you, Counselor Minor. Counselor Camillo?
Back when we were in CIP back in February, we had talked about the buses and we're going to extend the life by 1 to 2 years. If we did that, you wouldn't be ready for new buses, and you had 684,000 set aside for new buses this coming year. And you had 188,000 that you needed to spend on Chromebooks that we had kept out of the CIP. But extending the lifespan of the buses, you could have put that 684,000 for the following year without buying buses this year or security vehicles. I don't know if you did security vehicles, but
No, we didn't do security vehicles.
and then that 684,000 you had set aside came from a reimbursement from the state from the oil spill.
Right.
Of the $1 million you had taken from Wallace that was set aside for security and man trap there. Did that ever get done, the man trap at Wallace?
I'm not aware of that. There is no money currently earmarked for Wallace security.
But there was, and it was taken for the oil spill.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay. And at the same time, you needed one at Anna Reynolds, which Anna Reynolds will get one.
Right.
But my main concern is if you've gotten too much money over the past year, are the figures correct for Anna Reynolds? Are they really $35 million? And maybe we should go back and look at that before it goes to referendum. Because you had about $4 million extra here after you reimbursed the town. And if we had had 5 million, that could have lowered the mill rate by 2.5 mil. Or it could have paid down a bond, as Mr. Chapman had said, which would have helped look better to go to referendum for Anna Reynolds. So did we really need to spend all this, even though it's COVID and you're looking to protect the kids? Some of this is reimbursement from the state too, because it is COVID, or FEMA. Do we have all that in order to see if we can get reimbursed from the state and FEMA?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Although we have limited ability to do that because we were given CARES money, but
Okay.
And the Anna Reynolds numbers continue to be vetted by the architect Colliers, so they're very confident in the numbers.
Right. Okay. We'll talk about that another time. Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other council questions or comments? I'm sorry, Dr. Brumman, I was just asking you if you wanted to attend to make a comment here, and I didn't mean for it to end up being us grilling you. And the council certainly can discuss further. I think you had a time constraint, certainly, but.
Yeah. And I will put forth that busing list, and if necessary, I can have Dean present to the town at some point if there needs to be clarification. But yes, in the short run, I can send you the bus replacement list.
Okay, thank you.
All righty.
Thank you.
Any other council comment or discussion or question? I will say, I just have one more thought for the council, and that is that I think we need to consider moving forward how we're doing our capital improvement plan, program, and funding in terms of right now, there are several different sources. So on the town side, we have the overall CIP, the capital improvement plan. There's also a Parks and Rec separate CIP. We have the public school CIP. So there's lots of different pots of money that, in my estimation, allow for things to go a little unchecked, I guess is the way I would say it. So my concern is that maybe as a council moving forward, we consider looking at how CIP is handled, how we can better allocate funds to make sure that we have a plan in place that actually gets accomplished. Right now we have this plan, but then it changes every year, and we don't have a true 5-year plan that delineates what our priorities are. And we've talked about this as a council, but in addition to that, you know, there's these other pieces to the pie. So the Board of Ed public school CIP, the town funds $125,000 a year, and then the Board of Ed uses revenues to help fund that. And so public school CIP can go there, but it can also go into the overall town one. And, you know, we saw that some expenditures were used from the operational budget for CIP at the end of the year, given the surplus. So I just think there's a lot of loose ends here for CIP that maybe the council wants to consider moving forward, how to tighten that up and figure out how we can better fund both sides of government, and whether that falls on us or if the Board of Ed wants to do something differently or how we do it. But, you know, I see Dr. Brumman still here, but perhaps we could work together on looking at that moving ahead. Because I think there's some room for improvement in that.
Happy to. Absolutely.
There's some more council hands up. So Councilor Camilla, you're next, then Mankey, and then Minor.
And you're right. We have a finance department and the Board of Ed. We have one for the town. Maybe we should go back and look at our charter and a revision in the future and combine the two. Same thing with facilities. We wouldn't have to worry, are the schools being taken care of or the town facilities being taken care of? We'd have one department to handle all that. You have too many of the same thing. And in the future, maybe we could do that. Even transportation. We already have a highway department taking care of fire trucks, dump trucks, police cars. Adding buses to their job may not be a big deal if they're going to get a new facility one day, but we'd have to start with charter revision. It's just something to think about. And it could open a can of worms, and then again, it could save the town. So, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Camillo. Counselor Menke?
Yeah, I agree. Looking at the CIP, how it's set up and how it's how it moves through the process. It's better to do that now than it is to do in the middle of the CIP season. So if we're going to do that, I think we should probably start that, I would say, at least in August. So we would be prepared to going into the budget season next year. We would have a new understanding of what this is and how it works. But we need to do it. If we're going to do it, we just can't say we're going to work on it. We need to do it now before we get in. It's too late once we start the budget season. It's too late to do it. So we need to probably start that in August at least.
So Counselor Menke and Counselor Hannah, put that on your agenda list, okay?
Yep, I got it.
Counselor Minor, you're next.
Thank you. I think a lot of this comes back to conversations that have been started now with the Shared Services Committee for a year and a half that it's existed. And it's a continued conversation that needs to keep on. I don't believe we've had anything scheduled with the COVID situation that we've had, but I think that is something that needs to continue. And again, with having multiple CIP accounts and having what I believe the original intent of the CIP has been changed to more operational expenses versus capital improvement projects as they were originally intended, should be something that we should look at again moving forward, and something sooner than later. So that would be just all I'd have to add to that.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Minor. And Dr. Brummett was really instrumental in those committee meetings. I know last time around when I was on that committee, the Combined Shared Services Committee, we had some nice discussions with the Board of Ed and department heads from a couple of different departments, and they really presented a lot of information. So that really should continue to move forward. I agree. Counselor Nagel?
I agree with what previous people have said, including Councilor Menke. Having been the chair of this year of the CIP committee, I've stated in various different places exactly what people are saying, that something needs to be done to streamline and to not have an overlapping and have a clarification for everyone, so there aren't these misunderstandings and difficulties. Getting to the point of clarifying things without opening the charter, I believe, should be started in August or sooner rather than later, and then deciding what to do with charter later on, because as we all know, opening the charter, you can't just open it for one thing. It needs to be opened, and then there is a discussion that doesn't include people on the council in order of what is presented, if I'm correct. So I just wanted to restate that I've long since favored having some restructuring and not having overlapping done. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council comment, or Mr. Chapman, if you have anything further?
No, nothing for me.
All right, I don't see any other hands, so I think we're all set with that topic. Thank you. Thank you again, Dr. Brummett, for participating.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Yes.
I'm getting a text. Did you see Janet raising her hand?
No, I don't see Janet raising her hand. Hold on one second. I do not see Janet. I don't even see Janet on my list.
Janet, are you still there?
Oh, I see Janet, but her hand's not up. So go ahead, Janet, if
I'm
you have
still
something to
here,
add.
and I must be doing something wrong. I don't know if Dr. Brumette's still here. But this list that we have here came from our meeting in the beginning of June, the Board of Education. It doesn't add up. The 5.5 million, when you take all those expenses, it's about 660,000 in the hole. So there's more expenses listed than there is money balance as of May 26th. And I was just wondering if that's been updated or changed.
Yes, it has. I did make mention of that earlier on.
Okay.
So as I mentioned, it is not 100% up to date because we actually return more to the town than stated here. But,
Right.
you know.
But if you increase the amount to the town, it puts it further in the hole.
Right. Some of these things did not get spent. We did
Okay.
not buy a bunch of buses. We bought
Okay.
very minimal and a few other things. So yes,
Okay.
the money, don't worry about the money that is in this memo is coming back to the town.
Yeah, I was just curious because when I originally looked at it, it was when they voted on it in the beginning of June, it didn't come down to zero. It was in negative. So I was a little concerned.
Yet we had to make further adjustments and reductions,
Okay.
but not to this figure here that's being shown on the screen right now.
Okay. Thanks.
All righty.
Janet, Counselor Camillo's hand is up.
One more thing, Dr. Brummett. At the bottom here, it says there's about $650,000 of other expenses that you didn't have line items for. Whatever's left over, that will get added on to what's getting returned to the town also.
Yes, as of today, Lou was finalizing everything. And there are no additional expenses than what you see here. And in fact, what you see here, not everything got spent. So,
Okay, so
yeah.
we could be closer to $2.5 million, $3 million.
I don't know that it's going to be that substantial, but it could very well be $40,000, $50,000 more. I don't know. He'd have to comment on that because he was closing out the books today.
Well, and just so everybody understands, the figure that was up, I'm sorry, James, if you could put that other figure up. I just want to clarify. So while it says 2.49 or 2. Where's that figure? It's 2.29. There it is. The 2.29 is not actually going into the general fund in terms of being a true surplus. What really is a true surplus for next year is the 1.5, right, Dr. Brummett? Because the 590 comes back to the town, but only so that we can allocate it into the non-lapsing account. So we're kind of just the vendor, so to speak. It's coming back, but going right back to the Board of Ed, as was agreed upon during budget proceedings. And then the excess cost overpayment is really to make whole for next year what we're not going to receive from ECS because of the overpayment. So it really is just going to come in and then go back into budget for next year. So the 1.5 million is the true surplus number. I just wanted to clarify because, you know, it's a lot of figures and a lot of information, but that 590 is going back to the Board of Education. The 200 was because of the overpayment. Okay. I don't see any other hands up. Are we done now for this one? All right, no more hands. We're good. We're going to move on to the next item. Thank you.
Take care. Have a good evening.
You too. The next item was discussion Board of Ed non-lapsing account modified MOU. I will say this was originally added just to make sure that we were in line with our original agreement with the Board of Education, part of which was an MOU and part of which was a verbal agreement with the superintendent that the surplus would come back to the town if this money was provided into their non-lapsing account, that the surplus would come back because that's not always the case from the Board of Education. And it does appear, based on the written communication we received today and from what Dr. Brummett said, that this MOU is in good standing right now. The Board of Education will receive that $590,355, which was their initial budget request. The method of doing it this way was to avoid it being utilizing new tax dollars when there was an anticipated surplus. So using that instead of asking more from the taxpayers. Is there any other discussion on this other than my explanation? Anyone's, able to jump in? I don't see any hands up. The concern initially was that the 1.5 million would not be available for the town surplus, and it is now, so that's a good thing. I don't see, oh, wait a minute, there's an attendee. Counselor Camillo first, go right ahead.
One of the problems I have with the spending in the 11th hour, I mean, these problems and the things they needed didn't just pop up. They came up because they had extra money that should have come back to the town. And I don't think they did anything wrong, but knowing what's coming down the line and what's going on with the town, it's sort of unethical. You shouldn't do this in the 11th hour, because in March, we knew there was going to be a surplus. They could have bought these things over the past 8 weeks and got the things they needed. But in 10 days, they spent $3 million. I still don't think it's right. And the rest of the town didn't do that. They had extra money. They gave it back. And as we go forward into the next budget, that money will be there if it's needed. And the Board of Ed should have said, hey, we know it's coming in the fall. If we need extra money and we have this now, will you hold it for us? And they didn't. So hopefully things get better and we keep a better eye on things and our finger on it. Thanks.
Thank you, Counselor Camillo. I will say, I agree. I had a conversation with the superintendent yesterday around the planning for next year. My biggest concern when I saw the amount of spending that happened, as you mentioned, just in the last couple of weeks, my biggest concern is that the governor came out with this plan that indicates that districts may be looking at upwards of $10 to $15 million in expenditures, unanticipated expenditures, to manage COVID if we have an uptick or a resurgence of it. And so if we go back to a hybrid or a online platform, while there are some savings to be seen, trying to get kids into school, which is the governor's current plan, could result in, depending on how this goes, more staffing, more need for space, certainly a lot of things that would cost millions of dollars or could cost millions of dollars. So my concern was, if the Board of Education is spending that money down at the end of the year, are we going to have enough in our reserve should they come back to us next year with a big price tag because of these needs? And, the superintendent has assured me that she believes that the non-lapsing account would provide them with the funding they need. As she mentioned, they did put in their typical 1%, which means that at the end of the fiscal year today, they had, round about 1% is about $750,000 in excess. That wasn't mentioned earlier. It was briefly mentioned, in addition to the $590,000 that we allowed them to carry over extra. So that's approximate $1.3 million that they put into that non-lapsing account, on top of a $1.5 million surplus coming back to us, which is wonderful, and I'm grateful for that. And the $3 million approximate dollars that they spent at the end of the year. So when you really look at the amount of money that was left, that $505.5 million figure that was on that slide did not include the $750,000 that already had gone into that non-lapsing account. So that's another $750,000 that the Board of Education had extra, so to speak, at the end of the year. So it's a significant amount of money that was remaining at the end of the school year, and that when you look at the amount and you consider the give back in terms of the general fund was $1.5 million, that's not a big give back given the bigger picture of things. And I think that's what we're losing sight of here. So next year, when COVID becomes an issue, if it does, we're going to be looking for those dollars, and they're going to be tied up in buses and some other expenses. I'm concerned more about that CIP piece. I think it's a bad practice that when there's a surplus, we are doing capital improvement projects out of a surplus instead of giving it back to the general fund. Those dollars need to be requested through the proper channels, and that process needs to be honored if that's the process that we in the Board of Education are invested in. If the committee made a recommendation and the council voted on it, but then the Board of Education chose to spend the money anyway, that's a concern for me, and that's why I think this council needs to really look at that moving forward. All right, I'm getting off my soapbox now. Anyone else have anything to offer? Okay, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is public participation. I'll say it again. Anybody who's participating in the app, in the Zoom app, can raise hand. Use the raise hand function in the participants window at the bottom. Anyone who is calling into the meeting may use the *9 function in order to raise their hand to be recognized. We do have Rose Lyons in our, oh, there you go. Rose, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
All right, you're on.
Rose Lyons, 46 Elton Drive. I'm playing a little game of glasses on, glasses off, trying to write my notes and watch TV at the same time. It would be helpful if the listing of the monies that were being given back were attached to the agenda, as well as the Board of Ed information. But that being said, Two items near and dear to my heart, the CIP and charter revision was mentioned tonight, and I totally agree, and I've been advocating this for years, that everybody looks at the CIP and sees what these monies are supposed to be spent or were originally intended to be spent for. I don't know how willing Tom Bowen would be to give the town manager his insight as to what the original plan was for the CIP, but it would be interesting, I think, for the town manager to speak to him. I can't say that Tom would be available, but I'm sure that knowing Tom, he would make himself available for that type of discussion. Councilor Camillo brings up a lot of good points regarding the CIP earlier this year. The 1 or 2 years extension to the life of a bus, is that up to the CIP committee to decide that, or is it up to the Board of Ed? Once again, the point that he brought up about Wallace, the money's being spent there, that's a good point as well, but that $600,000, to my recollection, that was sitting for buses was for the bus garage to be rebuilt or whatever you're going to do. So there's a lot of questionable things here that probably should be addressed, and I agree with Councilor Mankey as well that it should be done not at the CIP this year, but prior to it being the committee meeting. I too see things that are spent at the end of the year. I saw Parks and Rec spend $300,000 once when they found out that Maureen Klett was asking for an accounting of the balances in the accounts. All of it was explainable, and whether or not it's ethical or not professional, I won't speak to that, but that's something too that should be addressed in my estimation. Finally, like I say, with the listing of all the things that were here that are coming back to the town, some of it COVID related, some because of the weather, I'm wondering if some of it too, like facilities and the EDC, are not due to salaries that were not, positions that were not refilled. I just think that we need a little bit more of an explanation rather than just a list, and this is it, because next year when you look at the budget, I hope that you don't think that they should have less money, the departments, because they spent less this year. You take into consideration the reasons why this money was given back. Again, stay safe, stay well, thank you, and good night.
Thank you, Ms. Lyons. I'm looking in our attendees window. I don't see any other hands up, so we can move on to the next item, which is remarks by counselors. Anyone? Counselor Camillo?
Thank you, Rose. Keeping an eye on the CIP and always having something at the end for us to think about.
Okay, thank you. I know Rose mentioned the 1 to 2 year extension of the lifespan. I just wanted to comment on that. My point was a little different than Councilor Camillo's, but the listing that was provided to us showed the lifespan of the buses, and it was presented to us that the buses had a lifespan of 11 years. And the buses that they were looking to replace on that grid that was provided were only at 9 years. So that means if we ordered them next year, they'd be at 10 years. That was a year early based on what the Board of Ed had presented at CIP. So that's why I think the committee didn't feel they needed to be replaced this year. There was still another year left on the Board of Ed recommended lifespan, was the interpretation of the committee. Anyone else? Councilor Camillo, did you put your hand back up? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Councilor Camillo.
Our buses are probably the best kept buses anywhere in Connecticut or anywhere. And they could go 12 years or even 14 years. Most towns will allow up to 12 years. And we could go without for a while. I mean, they're in great shape. We have great guys taking care of them. But I believe our highway department should start taking care of the maintenance. For what is spent with other vendors in other towns, it's a lot of money what they spend with DACO. So it might be time to think about that. That would pay for a new garage, just with the savings there. And it would help the highway department in the end. So something to think about later and talk about later on this year.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Camillo. Counselor Donahue?
Thanks. Just a question, and Mike, you and I could probably talk about this later, but if we build them a garage and keep them inside, does that increase the time they are available to be on the road? Because it doesn't make any sense to build a garage and not get any more use out of them.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. Actually, there have been previous discussions, and Counselor Minor, you might remember, but I believe they had indicated the lifespan of the bus would increase to about 14 years if they were garaged. Don't quote me directly, but I'm pretty sure that was the estimation.
Yes.
Okay, Counselor Nagel?
Yes, I agree. And what you mentioned before is true. And once again, we need to do something concerning clarity with CIP this summer, this fall, before we actually get to the point of having to go through the budget process again.
Right. Duly noted and on a note for agenda meeting.
Again.
All right. Counselor Mankey?
I'll make a note for the agenda.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're all set. No other hands are raised. We can move on to adjournment. Motion to adjourn, someone?
Make a motion.
I move we adjourn.
Motion to adjourn made by Counselor Mankey, seconded by
Second.
Counselor Camillo, I think it was. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, and adjourned at 6:44. I kind of like that Attorney Ancona's picture just came up and it's his wife. I enjoy that. Thanks, everyone, for
Good night, everybody.
attending.
All right.
Good night.
All right, thank you.